Good afternoon, everyone. I have to say I'm very happy to be here today because I think this combination of innovation, good ideas, engaged people, and this is what I'm going to talk about, capital will really help to solve some of the larger problems we face on our world. I now want to draw your attention to SDG number 1. It's so nicely put in the middle here, not influenced by us, but for us, it is in the middle of what we are doing. We are committed to fight poverty. You all know poverty does brutal things to human lives. And since humanity exists, poverty has been there. Today, we have to face the fact that it's close to 2 billion people who are living below $3 average income a day. The good news also, but the good news is, and we have to keep this in mind, poverty must not be destiny. We can solve the problem of poverty. And while we were talking about climate change and a lot of complex issues which we have not solved in a scientific way, for poverty you can put it down to a kind of simplified but clear formula. You have to create access for people to markets, to income, which means jobs, to skills, which may give them the possibility to be employed, and to infrastructure. And this is why we think that entrepreneurship can really help us to tackle poverty and to help to alleviate poverty. So this is the focus of our organization. elea Foundation for Ethics and Globalization exists to fight absolute poverty. And we do this in the context of globalization. We are focusing on areas where people live with a daily income which is below $3 a day on average, which is basically the global south. We are active in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. So what are we actually doing? We invest in local entrepreneurs who are trying to solve local problems. We believe that people who live in a certain area know best what is best to solve the problems there. And what we try to do is exactly to combine ideas, energy, and capital. We look for social entrepreneurs, for impact entrepreneurs who really try to change the life of the beneficiaries by building up powerful companies using the forces of the market to do good. What does this actually mean? We are scouting actively for innovative business models. We are looking for people with an entrepreneurial mindset who build up these organizations, and we try to support them with access to network. We have a dedicated professional team who in a partnership approach goes with these ventures for a time. When we started, we thought it would be 5 to 7 years. Now we realized it's more 7 to 10 years. And really make sure that when we sell our shares, when we leave the companies, we were the last philanthropic investor to invest. And these companies are economically viable. And thank you for already mentioning it, because this is at the core of our hypothesis of change, are economically viable, can survive by themselves to create lasting impact for the beneficiaries. In terms of capital, we try to buy shares of our partners. We invest into equity, which is our first priority. We never take majority. We want our entrepreneurs to stay in the driver's seat and to take the responsibility for the company. What we can do, we go into the boards, we advise them, we support them with what we're doing. We can also do long-term loans. Even sometimes we help them to get things started with a grant or a grant-like facility. But in the core, we want to be as close as partners as possible. And the closest link for an investor is to be invested into equity. And for our partners, it's a very clear signal. Either we are successful together, then we profit together, or we are not successful, then we both lose. The focus, what do we want to achieve, remains the same for each investment. We want to build a sustainable business, creating as much positive impact on the life of poor people. We invest in early growth, in the early growth stage. That's very important, not in startups, as there is a lot activity already in the startup sector, a lot of competition, a lot of hubs which were built, especially in certain countries where we are active. But then comes this gap. Companies grow for 2 to 3 years, reach a certain level of complexity, and then they do not only lack capital, but they also lack the knowledge how to continue, how to deal with this growth of complexity, what kind of organization they need to build, do they need a second layer of management, how to approach additional markets. And this is where we come in, first of all, with capital as investors, but as I said, beyond that, with knowledge, with skills, with expertise to help them to master this, what is called the pioneer gap, to then grow further to a stage where then impact funds or other larger investors would be interested to buy into these companies. We were active in 17 countries around the world at the moment and are focusing on 4 investment themes. And these investment themes are basically driven by the number of poor people. And if you look at poverty on a global scale, 70% of people are somehow linked to agriculture. This is why our number 1 topic is global agriculture and value chains. Create access to the market. We have these dysfunctional systems where a lot of product where we have actually demand cannot be delivered at a fair price because the market is not really working. This is one topic we invest. The second is huge topic, youth unemployment. So the gap between people who graduate from school and then not get employed because they have no access to the jobs which would be available. If you look at the statistics at most low-income countries, you have a lot of sectors who are seeking people and are not finding the right ones with the right skills, and on the other side, huge unemployment of youth. And we try to invest in business model who match this paradox, or to try to fix this paradox. Then the third one is informal retail and last mile distribution. That's the second largest sector after agriculture, where a lot of poor people are somehow involved. And it's so important to guarantee access to necessary goods, even in rural areas in poor countries. And the last one, and this is the closest link to what we heard before, we try to also invest in business model where we can fight poverty along with fighting climate change. And we all know of the importance of that. Maybe to be concrete, and here comes the nicest part, and now I have to be careful because of time, and otherwise Dan will chase me from the stage. I'm now talking about the things which I spent basically my whole life thinking about and working with, and so I have to say I could talk forever. I have only a few minutes left, so let's get started. First of all, one of our early investments, Angaza. Angaza is a company founded in Kenya by Leslie Marincola. Leslie is a Stanford graduate who decided that she wanted to put her skills, her technical skills, into the use of a huge problem. And the problem she wanted to address is that poor people have no savings. And as they have no savings, they will never be able to buy goods which are not extremely expensive, but still require a certain amount of money as a first down payment. And there were different models which tried to solve that. This was kind of a micro-leasing, but none of this really worked, because the problem is once you hand out the good with a first down payment, you never see the client again because he has the good and leaves and disappears somehow. So the solution would be a kind of a pay-as-you-go system. You buy something and you keep on paying for it. Again, if this is the idea, but you hand out the good to the customer, he can leave, and whether he pays or not doesn't play a role, if you are not able to turn off the tool you sell. And so this is what Angaza developed, a small chip which is put in small electronic devices, the most important solar lamp, but also small radios, even now very simple smartphones, where you put this chip in and the customer can buy it with a small down payment and then is required to make a payment every week. And if he stops paying, you can turn off the device through the chip. And this means you can have long payback periods over half a year or a year, but you make sure that if it's not paid, it turns off. And so the incentive for the customer to actually pay it until it's his or her own is quite high. In addition, through the chip, you get all kind of data. We just don't know yet about the base of the pyramid. Most important, when do they actually use the tool? How long do they use it? What are patterns, what are events which change this way of how they use it? And with this data, we can even adapt for products. We can adapt products to make sure that they serve the needs of the base of the pyramid better. When we invested in Agasa, they had sold about 3,000 of this pay-as-you-go devices in solar lamps. Now we are selling per year 3.5 million of those, reaching customers in 87 countries around the world. What was our contribution? Basically, Agasa was a tech company, so they were really focused on the product and very good in adapting to the customer. The whole question in between, how to strategically develop, whether to produce their own products, own solar lamps, own small radios, or to work with partners, and all those were all in question. We got strongly involved there, and today we can say Agasa is a ready to go independent company. The other example from the agricultural sector, from the business model, a lot simpler, is Coffee Circle. We invested in Coffee Circle 9 years ago. Coffee Circle is sourcing specialty coffee, high quality organic coffee from remote areas around the world. They started in Ethiopia, now moved into 7 other countries, and is selling the coffee solely over the internet. We were fascinated when we invested, when Coffee Circle had revenues of about 130,000 euro a year. We were fascinated how they built the logistics to source the coffee from very poor areas in Ethiopia. And the challenge there is people, and I visited it, people there live in a high level of poverty because the highly valuable product they have never reaches the market. And this is what Coffee Circle solves. We help them to define the growth strategy. We help them to attract also other investors. And today they have revenues in a 2-digit million area, are profitable and also ready to go, not dependent on an investor like elea anymore. Maybe one remark about how do we finance our work. First of all, as a foundation, we got the capital from our founder and chairman, Peter Wuffli, and his family. Peter Wuffli is the former CEO of UBS and chairman of Partners Group. And the first 3 years, we only invested our own money. But then we invited other investors, entrepreneurs, managers, other foundations who wanted to fight poverty, but wanted to do it in a very concrete way and being as close as possible by not having to manage it themselves, to invest together into our portfolio. And this is the elea Philanthropic Investors Circle. We have now about 40 co-investors and invite people who are interested in fighting poverty in an entrepreneurial way to do this with us. Now we come to a very important last point. If the only matrix and the only KPI of your success is not financial, but its impact, you need to measure this impact. And this is why we defined our own impact measurement methodology. The reason was when we started, we looked at 32 measurement methodologies and none dared to put a number at the end of what you want to achieve. And you see on the very right, we defined the elea return on investment. This is the number of impact points you get per 1,000 Swiss francs you invest. This just as an idea, because we think also in this area you have to be a lot more and a lot closer to the logic on how markets work. If you spend money for impact, you have to make sure that you actually also reach impact. And as a co-investor of elea, you then get an impact report who looks almost like a financial report. And this might look technical, but at the end, it's extremely valuable. Whenever you invest in an asset, you want to know what's my return on it in a financial way. And in addition, if you invest in an impact company, you should also ask, what's the amount of impact I get for the money I invest? So this was in a nutshell what we are doing, and I'm now happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Well done. Let's give him a hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
I see lots of questions coming in, which is fantastic. Please bring them in, and we're going to answer as many of these as possible. Okay, so first one. How can we better channel investments from the West into developing and emerging markets to empower entrepreneurs on site?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the perfect question. What I think is we have to help to build an ecosystems with organizations like elea who are close. One of the most important levers we have is not the money, but it's being close to the local entrepreneurs. We spend a lot of time on the ground. We try to understand what is driving them, why they pick the solution they pick, and then we are supporting them in doing what they are doing. So I think the short answer would be closeness. We have to come closer to these entrepreneurs.
I love that. And now this is almost the opposite question. And this is Coffee Circle and others that you mentioned are based in Europe. Should we not focus more on financing local entrepreneurs?
Yes, this might be a misunderstanding. Both companies have co-founders in the south, in Kenya and in Ethiopia, and this is exactly why we invested. We need, for many of them, the western or northern markets. Coffee, we need the buyers in the north. For Coffee Circle, it's Germany, growing coffee market, so that's the easiest value generation for the farmers in the south. And same for Angazo, we need some of the Western technology, of the US technology, to help people on the ground. But both are locally rooted, and we have some examples which are also south to south, where we really stay there. Fully agree, we have to find local entrepreneurs to drive it.
How do you source your pipeline or investments?
Very actively. We have a very rigid sourcing system because it's not so easy to identify these entrepreneurs. We look at about 1,000, close to 1,000 possible investments a year. We finally do 5 to 6. So we have a very rigid selection process, and we actually travel around the different countries around the world to find these entrepreneurs. Starts with desk research. Then we have an internal pitch process. The best one gets selected. We travel there, spend 3 to 4 weeks on the ground, talk to everyone. And with this net we create, we hope that 7 or 8 ideas will stick. And after 7 or 8 ideas, if we end up with 1 or 2 investments, it was a successful scouting tour.
You already shared us a couple examples, but maybe you have another one. An example of a solution which tackles poverty and climate change at the same time.
Yes, we just did an investment which is active in Cambodia and Bangladesh. It's EdTech, and the idea there is many of you might know the old tradition of the idea of changing the cooking stoves, the cooking system in rural homes. Actually, there were not many where it really worked because people could not either afford the right ones, or when it was given away for nothing, they had no incentive to use it properly. So EdTech used the technology of Angaza with the pay-as-you-go system to sell them to people locally. And because we have the data through the chip, we can now use it for offsetting the carbon emissions. So, which means if you buy a cook stove as a customer, you not only reduce the negative effects this has on your personal health, but you also, the more you use it, the more you get refunded through the certification of the reduced CO2 emissions. So this is quite a complex topic, but it starts to work. We sell the CO2 emissions at the moment in Australia, and it's really picking up.